So the Chainsaw Man anime has been released, and I'm sure it's piqued a few people's interest. You may be one of those people who checked out the anime and are now waiting for something to experience while you're waiting for episodes. Well, it's my pleasure to recommend to you the subject of this macho recommendation, the creator of Chainsaw Man's previous series, Fire Punch, a manga that is concluded, totaling 83 chapters. At this point, an anime adaptation hasn't been announced, but if you want to be in the know before everybody else finds out about it, grab yourself a warm beverage, get comfortable, and join me as we explore the frozen dystopia that is Fire Punch. Right off the bat, humanity is in a terrible spot. The Ice Witch has frozen most of the world, and everyone is just trying to get by. It's so bad that our 15-year-old main character Agni acts as a food source for his village. But how does that work, you ask? Well, Agni and his sister Luna are what are known as blessed, meaning they have something like a superpower. The two can regenerate any wounds they receive, so Agni volunteers to have his arm cut off multiple times to provide food for the villagers. Gruesome and awful? Absolutely. But hey, you work with what you got. Though not everyone sees it that way, especially soldiers from the city of Behendolg, the last remaining human bastion. Upon discovering cannibalism within the village, the person in command, Doma, burns everything to ash with his blessing, in the name of cleansing the town, saying these people aren't human, and they leave with their righteous work completed. But not really, because Agni's regeneration is robust, and due to that, it leads to a problem. Doma's fire will burn a person until they're dead, but Agni can't die. So Agni is going through an endless cycle of burning alive, having his body repair itself, only to get burned again. And don't misunderstand, this doesn't mean Agni is impervious to pain. He still feels it all the time. And he suffers through this cycle of just burning alive for 8 years, doing absolutely nothing except his body being cooked well done. But someone forgot to pull out the metaphorical steaks off the grill for nearly 3,000 days. The only thing that makes the pain slightly bearable is thinking about one goal: killing Doma. When Agni solidifies his goal, he trudges through the below zero wasteland in the name of avenging those lost, becoming Fire Punch. Okay, so I'm sure you've pieced it together already. Fire Punch is not a story you can take lightly. It's easily one of the bleakest I've ever read. So if you know you're not in a good mental headspace to read a story of this type, passing on Fire Punch might be a good call. Additionally, while I'm not your dad and you can do whatever you want, the series definitely has a content warning. The term that starts with R and rhymes with grape is used a lot more than just a one-off thing, and often ventures into points that are modern taboos. And to properly explain how, I want to talk about a returning aspect of Fujimoto's stories that I mentioned in my Chainsaw Man video: absurdity. Fujimoto has this talent of blending his stories with absurd moments that, rather than pulling you out of his series, endear you to them. The absurdity is like watching Fujimoto in an improv class. We see a setup we're familiar with, and out of nowhere, Fujimoto adds a new bit to the improv that draws us in. And it's not like a half-hearted attempt either. You get the feeling he is really buying into the story he's creating, and because of that, it invests us too. It's not always tasteful, but I commend his willingness to try, because when it hits, it hits. To highlight this, I want to mention a few out-of-context examples varying in quality to give you a little taste of what to expect. 3 characters are about to fight on top of a moving vehicle. A proud soldier asks for the names of the other 2 combatants. They respond with, "We can't hear you, it's too loud." To which he responds, "Speak louder, I can't hear you, it's too loud." Ugh, whatever. Someone decides to replicate a move they saw in Spider-Man 2, the Tobey Maguire one. A man wants 2 children to love his dogs a little bit too much. In a blowing snowstorm, a nearly naked lady shows up. Her name in the wiki is Bitch, by the way, and she only speaks English. And when somebody asks if she's freezing, she responds, "I have a really fast metabolism." Don't worry, it goes 2 ways. And one of my personal favorites, this face happens, which out of context looks incredibly cursed. But with it, it's so much worse. There's more I could mention, but this is my attempt not to get the video age restricted, so I'll stop there. But the absurdity adds more than just engaging the audience, but also to the overall tone of the story. The series feels like a mess, but a great mess. The kind that is intentional and adds to the overall quality of the story. It's a world where modern morality is impossible. It's entirely alien to our world. Take the art style. It features multiple smaller lines on character features, adding shadows to their faces. This contributes to a grittiness that immerses you into its world. For example, look at Agni. He's a man burning on fire, and while he looks cool, he's not so cool that you'll want to be him. Half of his head is flesh that is always burning, and if you look close enough, you'll notice he has no eyelid to close that eye. It's always open, making this superpowered character not look like a traditional power fantasy you want to emulate, but rather a sad human with a painful existence. And one thing I love about the series is how characters are drawn realistically. People in the series look like people, and not just fictional characters. Which is a silly bar to pass, but as someone who's growing disillusioned with characters going for a more modern anime look, I thought this was cool and refreshing. But what makes this so enjoyable to read is Fujimoto's presentation of Fire Punch as a manga. Having the story be told with multiple panels or a single powerful image to convey its story. That sounds like really basic stuff, but combined with Fujimoto's comedy chops and the bleak setting, it creates one-of-a-kind moments that will stick with you. An example that really hits this home is Chapter 31, and more specifically, the truck sequence with Togata. In this moment, an immortal character is riding a truck, and what follows is an incredible black comedy sequence. I won't explain further because I want to save that as a surprise if you check it out, but it's amazing. Fire Punch is a fantastic manga that is worthy of being a macho recommendation, with the caveat that it's a very bleak story that you gotta be in the right healthy mindset to enjoy, and if you are, have a great time. Thanks a whole bunch for checking out this video. If you're new to the channel, I make videos and stuff I really dig, so if you're looking for new things to get into, feel free to subscribe to stay up to date for future macho recommendations. Here's a playlist of other comics and manga I've talked about so far, and here's a video you might dig. Thanks for watching, and take care of yourself. Hot Fuzz is the second film in the Cornetto trilogy directed by Edgar Wright. It's a movie focused on Sergeant Nicholas Angel, the model cop in the London Metropolitan Police Force. But to his coworkers, he's a little too good. So much so that his performance makes everyone else look bad. Instead of using that as motivation to improve, everyone agrees to send the sergeant to a small, quiet village in Stanford. There, Nicholas is subjected to the culture of the English countryside. The most action-packed a day can get is finding a swan for a Mr. P.I. Stinker. The movie evolves from there, but I want to focus on the film's director, Edgar Wright. Edgar Wright is my favorite film director. This guy has made plenty of movies that shaped my sense of humor and what I enjoy. Stuff like Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Yes, I was one of those people, and I enjoyed that phase of my life immensely. Shaun of the Dead, the already mentioned Hot Fuzz, and my personal favorite so far, The World's End. Baby Driver was fun, and I still need to see Last Night in Soho. One of the things I love about Edgar Wright as a director is the excitement and energy you can feel in his films. It could be unexpected visual gags that make you crack a smile, dialogue that feels very quippy and makes you laugh, but more than that, adds characterization, and emotional beats that actually stick the landing.
As I'm sure you've noticed from the title of this video, today we'll be analyzing Hot Fuzz. Specifically, the fence-jumping sequence.
So our sequence begins with a scoundrel stealing junk food from the Stanford supermarket. If you've read the novel version of this movie, you'll discover that the shoplifter, let's call him Peter, was actually stealing food to prevent the populace from getting huge spikes of sugar from the unhealthy treats, acting on his chaotic good alignment. But Sergeant Nicholas Angel is lawful good. Thus, this is a crime of the highest degree and enters into the familiar territory of my way or the highway. When Nicholas reveals himself, Peter shits a brick. He thought this was going to be smooth pickings. The camera zooms in, cutting between the contrasting expressions of Peter and Nicholas. Peter with wide-eyed terror, while Nicholas, the professional boulder, stares unblinkingly. A ticking begins to play as the two stare at each other, escalating the tension until Nicholas squints just a little, communicating the phrase, "Your ass is grass, and I'm gonna mow it." Not understanding the line's brilliance and not wanting to look foolish, Peter attempts to disengage from the conversation, while Nicholas, feeling the obligation as a man of the law, throws his hat to an adoring fan off-screen and gives chase to explain why that line was actually really cool. As the chase begins in earnest, we are introduced to the most important character in the film, Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan is a professional ass-kicker, a master of Hong Kong cinema, and the teacher of one of the lesser characters in the film, Nicholas's partner, Danny. The fact Danny has never met Jackie Chan outside of his movies is irrelevant, as Danny reads the mantra of his master's work, Super Cop, meet the cop that can't be stopped. We get a point of view of Peter running away from Nicholas, as Danny throws his master's teachings into the bin of knowledge. As the chase escalates, it's essential to understand the character's body language. Peter runs with exaggerated, flailing movements, indicating his out-of-control emotions, as he should, because Nicholas moves in a compact running style, his arms locked at 90 degrees, rising up and down. And it's important to note that Edgar Wright has gone on record saying that actor Simon Pegg, short for Peggle, wasn't actually running during that scene, but because of his sheer body movements, actually moved the ground with his sheer force of will. He's basically floating, those legs aren't even real. A citizen observes Paladin Nicholas Angel in action with a look of excitement, as they should. Peter runs in front of a Jeep, a compassionate use of product placement as the film is sponsored by Ram. More citizens talk about how awesome Nicholas Angel is, as they should. The shaky cam reveals the characters running into a suburban labyrinth-looking area. Now, this could be a subtle reference to the Greek myth involving a labyrinth, trapping the Greek hero Theseus, short for Thesaurus, and the Minotaur. Theseus, of course, being Nicholas Angel, and the Minotaur obviously being 20th century Austrian novelist Stefan Zweig, whose work involved people outside at certain times. A bike rider wishes the sergeant good morning, as they should. We are introduced to one of the film's most prominent threats and social commentary: mothers. Specifically, single mothers, who are left to raise their children alone from the harms of the world. But as great as Sergeant Nicholas Angel is, even as the best cop on the force, dare I say, the world, even he cannot stop the plight of how society treats these women doing the best they can. Danny finally catches up to his partner, ready for the logistics of this scenario. Still, Nicholas, wanting to gather the proper resources and knowledge before bringing it to a Twitter thread, tactically retreats, continuing the chase with Peter. As Nicholas runs to the fence, we hear Danny ask, "Through the gardens?" To which Nicholas asks, "What's the matter, Danny? Never taken a shortcut before." And this is where the genius of the setup is properly unleashed. By drawing a direct comparison with the labyrinth in the old myth, we see this scene deconstructing that idea. As Sergeant Nicholas Angel jumps over the fence, it gives the subtle meaning of the scene. The future is now, old man, to the myth of old.
And it's these words that Danny internalizes, jumping the old man, that... Damn it. Well, that concludes this video lecture. Okay, I think I have an idea of what you're thinking. Why are we here? And that's a great question to ask. Why are any of us here? We're on a floating rock in space that is just close enough to a star that we don't immediately die. But it's a question that the more you think about it, the scarier it gets. Why are we here? It's also a question that is at the regenerating core that is Fire Punch, a difficulty that comes back again and again. Spoilers inbound for the manga, just in case you were watching this and want to go in blind.
Fire Punch is a series that keeps trudging on through its chapters. Its conflict is set up in Chapter 1 and has a confrontation in Chapter 8. It's a series that makes you think you know what's gonna happen, but much like that improv metaphor, it's subverted at every moment, until you come to ask yourself, why are we here? A thought that's reflected in Agni's existence, constantly flip-flopping between wanting revenge from Doma, the man who ruined his life, to realizing it won't bring his sister back, to wanting it anyway. It took me 3 different attempts to get into this series, and a lot of that was because of Agni. He wasn't acting like other protagonists I'd seen in other stories. He kept second-guessing his goals, Moments of realization and declaring his outlook were burned away back where he started. I didn't click with Agni. I thought he was inconsistent, and it took me that third time to realize that was the point of his character. As he says in chapter 41, "I've been on fire since I was 15, my body is the only thing that's matured." He's not a hero who subscribes to individualism. He doesn't carve the world out of a strong sense of self. To some, he's a benevolent deity. To others, he's Satan. But in reality, he's just a man in a unique position. Barely anyone gets that. They see what they want to. It's the icon they see, not the person underneath it. Barely anyone understands that person hidden inside the flames, except for arguably the best character in the series, Togata. Togata, at first glance, is a character you might have an idea of what to expect. An amoral character, spouting crude and funny dialogue that can be summarized as, "Dude, that's so random, lamau," demolishing the fourth wall like Deadpool. This character has been alive for over 300 years, one of the oldest characters in the story, and like Agni and many others, Togata is blessed with regeneration. And the first time hearing that sounds awesome, but much like Olgierd from The Witcher 3 Hearts of Stone, immortality is more of a curse than a pro. Especially in this frozen wasteland, there's nothing to do. How are you supposed to live in a world such as this? Well, Togata found a way. Movies. Movies are so freaking cool, man. I have a soft spot for them ever since I was a kid, and I'm sure you do too. And this is something you can easily relate to with Togata. It was that runtime, the stories, the villains, the worlds or universes created, and the artistic expression that made these movies worth it. They didn't even have to be good, they just had to be entertaining. But at some point, his house and all of the movies were burned down too, leaving Togata without a purpose. But then along comes this dude on fire, and then that purpose is rekindled. He's going to direct his own movie, and that crispy chap will be the main character. The story is going to be a revenge tale. Doma, the unredeemable villain, and Agni, the tragic hero, avenging those lost. In preparation for the movie, Togata takes Agni under his wing, teaching him essential English words to distract him from the pain of burning alive, helping him get better at acting, etc. All for the prep of making the movie the best it could be. And finally, when the big conflict arrives, the day of catharsis they have been building up to, Agni goes off script. He puts the safety of other people above his revenge, which pleases everyone. Except Togata. For Togata, his film was the most important thing to him, his purpose, and his leading actors deciding to do something entirely out of character. In the sequence of the Helmdog's destruction, Togata is constantly complaining that it makes no sense, and as the reader, I was thinking, whatever. There are more important things going on. But for a nearly immortal being, it's easy to fall into a nihilistic viewpoint, where nothing matters, so there's no reason to do anything good, and it validates being a piece of shit to everybody you meet. And it's especially easy for Togata to do so, because he's been alive for a long time. Long enough to see the Hemdog founded, and the shame that it's built on a lie. The last bastion of civilization with a king is not based on natural history, but in a movie called Fire the Hemdog. People needed more education to think critically about and interpret the work, so when the movie plot was presented to them as fact, they believed it. Because it helped them make sense of the world, it offered a goal and something to keep in people's hearts. And isn't that crazy to think about? The culture's view on something is the thing that's carried over, not what the actual work is and what it represents. Simply agreeing with someone's opinion without thinking about it led to the Hemdog's rise, and as long as they articulate it in just the right ways to be entertaining, or use surface level references to bring it together and sound smart, it would be gospel, presented by a seemingly important figure. An example is something like, I don't know, a scene analysis on the 2007 film Hot Fuzz, weaving in general points about the movie with over-exaggerated aspects and references to older works to make it seem more intelligent than it actually is, culminating in an arguably entertaining analysis, but one that, if taken at more than face value, will lead to people internalizing those points and turn it into the canonical way of viewing the film. Looking at it through that lens, it's understandable that Togatta would carry a nihilistic mindset, especially seeing time pass for such an extended amount and people building a worldview around a lie. But it's Agni's off-character act that leads everyone to have ideas of what he is: a savior or a destroyer, a god or a demon. But the majority think him a god, and because of it, they rally under his name. And this culminates in one of Togatta's best moments. After the destruction of the Hemdog, when things have died down, a man appears with important information for his lord and savior. This man was the benefactor of Agni's actions earlier in the story. Besides being a capable fighter, he has a unique blessing, that being able to read the minds of those around him. And it's this ability that leads to this big reveal. The guy basically says, "Lord and Savior Agni, I can read minds, they're full of shit, and they don't have your best interests at heart. And I know something else. She's acting like a facetious woman. She's actually a man in a woman's body." And I'm sure you're thinking, dude, what do you mean? You've been referring to them as him whenever talking about Togatta. And I'll admit, I may have thematically ruined this reveal by doing that, but this is the reason why. Togatta is a character that, since their birth, has suffered from gender dysmorphia. For those unfamiliar with the term, which, I gotta admit, includes myself until I looked it up, is when there's a mental clash between a person's biological sex and gender identity, and Togatta is greatly affected by this. Because of his regeneration, a sex change operation would never be possible because it would just revert back to where he started. He's been trapped in this identity for his entire life. Remember, he's one of the oldest characters in the series. And I love how this reveal isn't played as a joke. It's not a way to put down a character for laughs, but an emotionally raw moment. You can empathize that the mind-reading guy was just trying to look out for Agni, but it comes across as extremely shitty to reveal such a personal thing about someone without their permission. When this happens, Togatta's done. Forget the movie, Agni, all of it. He's gonna leave and figure it out. This culminates in Agni chasing after him and just asking for understanding. This is where Togatta becomes fantastic. More than just a fourth wall breaking comic relief, but a genuine character. He talks about how his appearance makes him sick, and he wakes up in the morning only to realize he's still in this position, and relates this back to why Agni ultimately disgusts him. He puts it best: "The reason all those people believe you're a god, it's not because of your good deeds or the miracles you performed. It's because of your appearance. Because you're on fire, it persuades them that you must be a god. Face, sex, height, physique, voice tone, and way of speaking. Any hope people have in others comes from their appearance. That's why it makes me feel sick. I can't live up to anyone's expectations. After all, you hate me like this, don't you? You have expectations for the facetious and crazy female Togatta, right? So do I. Because if I was just boring male Togatta, I couldn't live in this world. If you work hard enough, you can be the person you want to be. But that's something I could never do. I mean, I've just gone insane again. I don't even remember a whole lot about myself." From Togatta's perspective, Agni gets to be everything he wants. He's not trapped in a body he doesn't relate to. I mean, he's on fire, but compared to burning alive or having the mental anguish that you don't get to be who you identify as for hundreds of years, I could see someone choosing the burning. At least people could love them for who they are rather than the dream of what they could be. This additional aspect contributes to Togatta's nihilistic outlook. If you can't even be yourself, how can you have the strength or desire to care about other people? And speaking as someone who got lucky and was born with a biological and gender identity I'm comfortable with, I feel bad for people who don't or who can't. That's gotta be awful and painful in a way I'll never truly understand. But what happens next made me love the series even more. Togatta is getting ready to leave, so Agni does the most difficult thing he could do. He gets vulnerable. He emotionally bares himself to Togatta, saying how much he means to him. And it begins when Togatta asks Agni to give him a reason why he cares. "Because if I had an older sister, I think I want her to be like you. You have so many stories I haven't heard. It's exciting. The time we spend talking are the only times I forget the pain. It reminds me of when I used to speak to my little sister. During those times, I was able to forget all about this turd of a world. That's why I started to think of you as an older sister." Would Would you rather be an older brother? This moment hit me harder than any other part of the story. Two characters just laid themselves out for the reader to see. They're not real, but it sure feels like it. Toggata's lamenting of his position and Agni's genuine love for him. Now, it's not written like that perfect Hallmark card, but it's their truth, and that's all it needs to be. It's at this point that Toggata's perspective changes. He's no longer just an amoral, nihilistic character, breaking the fourth wall like Deadpool, but an actual person. He's Toggata, and for the first time in his life, he matters to someone as the person he is. He's loved. Initially, I was going to mention the reason we're here is simply because we're alive. But revisiting this chapter, I've got a different answer. Connection. Let's face it, we're not getting out of this alive. We're all gonna die at some point. It takes no prisoners. But the thing that keeps us here, no matter how hard it gets, is each other. We can be spiteful and selfish and low-key, kind of a dick. But damn it, we're all we've got. It's connection that will keep us alive long after we pass on. And I think that's the fuel for these characters to continue. It keeps Agni hanging on, no matter how bad it gets, because as long as he lives, those he loves do too. So I have one thing to say to you, much like I did to this mess of a video. If you're gonna remember only one thing from me or my work, I hope it's this: live.